Good morning, and a happy Mother's Day to those of you who are mothers and grandmothers. And I think there are some great grandmothers here as well. They're really good grandmothers. You know, the great grandmothers. That Mother's Day is one of those days that is different for various people. For some people, this is the day. This is the day because it's a day of reward for all the sacrifice and love that you have poured in to your children. And now they're sitting there by your side, worshiping with you here on Sunday. Going out and eating with you this afternoon, and you're seeing, I did okay. I did all right. For other people, this is a great day too, because this is your first Mother's Day. Or you've added another one. And so you've got a little more love and a little more responsibility and a little more care there. There are people for whom this is a painful day. Because there are women who grew up wanting to be a mom just like their mom, only to discover they could not have children. And so this day reminds each year of an unrealized goal, of a dream. So it's important for us to love those women. And for others of us, this is a hard Mother's Day, and I'm one of those, in which this is our first without our mom, or without our grandmother, who have passed away in the last year. And so it was a little different this morning, wasn't it? Not being able to make a phone call or a visit. Stopping myself before I bought the card. The Mother's Day is a day in which we can reflect on the honor, the responsibility, the dedication of being a good mother. Because another group for whom it's hard are people who did not have a good mother. And for women who think, I wish I'd been a better one. So we can only pray and work together on this day that has so many complicated emotions swirling about, to support one another, to build one another up, to encourage one another. And if someone's hurting or seems to be on the verge of tears when people around them are happy, taking a moment to tear away from the happy folks to put our arm around the person that's having a hard time. And letting them know that, yes, you're part of the family and we love you so much. Some of us have mothers, and my mother was a bit like this, for whom her child is like nothing else in the world. And her love for that child knows no law, no pity. It dares all things and crushes down remorselessly all that stands in its path in taking care of that child. And if you're a mother like that, I applaud you and cheer you on for taking care of your child. We'll talk about a little later about some of the caveats to that, about the moments where you need to slow down and listen. But mother's love is what has really kept some of us going during the hard times. That remorseless love that lets us know that we are going to succeed. We are going to do well when we get discouraged, because reminding us that there's a cheerleader there telling us that we will. My mother, there I am with my college graduation. My mom's there. My grandmother Summers was there too. She wasn't in the picture, but she was an important aspect to me. My two little brothers there, you laugh when you see one. My brother's a lot bigger than me, and even the little one ended up being a lot bigger than me. It was a big day for Mom, because I was graduating from the college that she had attended as a freshman. Mom had the three sons that lived. I had an older brother who died. But my mother never knew her mother, because my mother's mother died when she was 3 weeks old. So my mom was raised by this couple, her dad's parents. And my grandfather was only 21, and they'd been married 11 months when my grandmother died. And his parents stepped in and said they'd take care of Rosemary until he got settled down and was ready. Well, 4 years later, he'd remarried, and he came back to pick up his daughter, and his mother told him, "She's my daughter now." So her grandmother became her mom, and because she lived with us for 5 years when I was a teenager, she sort of became my Mom Taylor in her late 80s. But so she grew up in a house with grandparents as her parents. Very strict preacher as the father figure, and a dad who was more like a brother, who was also a preacher, who came in regularly to see her and Mom Taylor. Eventually, my mother, who was the only child of an only child, her dad was an only child too, grew up to be surrounded by grandchildren who loved her unreservedly. In going from that little girl to that beloved grandmother, though, she became a tour de force as a mother. This morning we're going to talk about three other mothers that are in Scripture. They're different kinds of mothers. Like my mom, a couple of them may have had sort of untraditional or unexpected wrinkles to their style of motherhood, or what prepared them for motherhood. Hannah, for example, in 1 Samuel chapter 1, we meet when she goes to the temple with her husband. It's a time of festival, of rejoicing, of celebration, and Hannah is not happy. Hannah is grieving because she does not have a child in a society where it is all important for a woman to have children. And she is grieving, so intensely that while she is praying to God to have a son, the priest walks by and thinks she's drunk because of the intensity of her prayer. I don't know how often you have prayed so intensely that people walking by thought you were drunk. But there, a lot of emotion was being poured into that prayer that she might have a child, might have a son. And she indeed had a son. And sometime later, she brings the child back to the temple, because she had made a promise in that prayer of intensity that if she had a son, that son, she would give back to the Lord to serve Him. So she returns to the tabernacle, and she tells the priest, for this, after she reminds him that she was the woman that he had seen praying, for this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to Him. Therefore, I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he has lived, he is lent to the Lord. She continues to love him. She continues to care for him. She continues to make his clothes for him, the Bible tells us. She doesn't walk away, but she has made a promise. She has dedicated her son to the service of the Lord, and put him in a context where that can happen. The second mother we want to consider this morning is Mary. And Marian has already taken a little bit of time off the sermon. You can thank Mary for that afterwards. Marian, as you know, had a baby. Luke chapter 1, Luke chapter 2, and Matthew, the first chapter, we read about the circumstances surrounding the birth of Jesus. It was an awkward moment, an awkward time. I would imagine an awkward 9 months and several years for Mary after that, when this unmarried young girl is found to be pregnant. She's had a vision, probably unsure whether this is a dream, a vision, or just a stranger talking to her about she's going to have a child. And this child is going to be great. And when the child is born, she goes to the temple. And there at the temple, she hears that prophecy that we heard mentioned earlier. Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed, and a sword will pierce through your own soul also, so that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed. Strange words, words that would resonate with this woman, wouldn't they, with yours, with you? But she could not have known everything they would mean for her. Because later in Luke 2, when he's about 12, we read these words of Mary to Jesus. You think, oh, it would be great to have Jesus as my child. No problems ever. He always behaves, always obeys. No problem. And his mother said to him, 12-year-old son, think about your son when he's 12 or your daughter when she's 15. Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress. Have you been there? I have. And he said to them, why were you looking for me? Did you not know I must be in my Father's house? He was in the temple talking with the rabbis. They should have known. Okay. But a moment of, even Mary has these typical moments of stress and concern about her child as he's going through his childhood. They did not understand the saying he said to him. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth, but was submissive to them. And his mother treasured up all these things in her heart. Mary remembered these things. She thought about them. What did this mean? And how does this tie in with what that man said in the temple back when he was a baby? Mark chapter 3, we have another interaction between Mary and her son. Mary's son Jesus now has left home, and he's traveling around the country teaching people. He has left the carpentry trade that his father had pursued, that he had done, and now he is out teaching and traveling, essentially functioning as a rabbi, an itinerant rabbi. It says in verse 20 of Mark chapter 3, he went home and the crowd gathered again so they could not even eat. There's a lot of people following Jesus, and he's saying things that are making an impact on their lives, but it's also causing some unrest and some concern about whether Jesus even has time to eat. His mother hears about this. She's concerned about Jesus. And I want to ask you, let's see, who will I pick on now? Okay. Wayne McAdams. How would you feel if someone came to you and said, what do you... I just heard your son Luke's down preaching in Kansas City saying he's the Messiah. Okay. And Becky, if you heard that about Kyle, yeah. Okay, a little bit of concern there. Well, Mary had that concern. So she gathers up his brothers, of whom he had apparently at least 4, takes them with her to seize him, to bring him home, for they thought he was out of his mind. Sometimes mothers have a son or a daughter about whom you're very concerned. Whom you're very concerned because that child's doing things that scare you a little. And sometimes you do need to go out and bring them home. But sometimes the child actually knows what they're doing, as was the case here. But Mary, even so, had to hear some very difficult words on this occasion, because when she got there and sent word into Jesus through the crowd, because she couldn't get to him, that she was there, she and his brothers were there, they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And he answered them, who are my mother and my brothers? And he, looking around at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and my sister and my mother. We understand those words of commitment to God and the relationship that exists between us and our Savior. Have you ever thought about what those words sounded like to Mary? I remember when I was about 12 years old myself, I was having a hard time one day, and self-concept was a little low and wasn't feeling very appreciated. And so I said to my mother in a moment of great frustration, nobody loves me. You ever say anything to your mom and you knew when you said it that you had not meant to, but you just said something that really hurt your mom? That was one of those moments for me, because she loved me very much. So Mary hears the words of Jesus that are words of balance, words of perspective, words of discipleship. She hears them as a mother, but also gains some insight into who her son is and what that prophecy meant so long ago. because this is the beginning of the sword rending the soul. Because Mary has to stand, and does stand, at Jesus' cross and watch her son be crucified. Watch her son die. What do you do as a mother? Then 3 days later, to hear he may be alive again. And we don't have recorded the specifics of Jesus meeting with Mary after the resurrection. We do have a mention that he met with his brother, James. And we know that after Jesus' ascension, his disciples returned to Jerusalem and they gathered together constantly to pray as they await the coming of the Spirit. And among those who are in that crowd waiting for the coming of the Spirit, because the Messiah has come, He has arisen, He has ascended back to the Father, He's coming again, is Mary, the mother of Jesus. So Mary, the relationship changes as the child grows older, doesn't it? But this time, in this one, even more so, because Mary now becomes her son's disciple. Our third dedicated mother was Eunice. Eunice was the mother of Timothy. In the reading we had by Brian earlier, he read about Eunice and her mother, and how because of these two dedicated godly mothers, Timothy knew the Scriptures. Timothy, as a child, as a young man, had faith because of his mother and his grandmother. He was a most blessed young man, because these women had taken the time to make sure that their son knew God and knew the story of God's interaction with mankind. That he knew what it meant for him to be a follower of God. They had dedicated themselves to that task as mothers. They weren't the only ones that had done so. Earlier in that reading, there was a hint that Paul's mother had done the same. The Eunice, one of the great heroes of faith in the Bible. Who not only believed God, but taught someone else, her son, who would go on to teach others himself. The Bible elsewhere tells fathers to instruct their children in the way of the Lord. The fathers usually don't do that alone, and sometimes the mothers do the bulk of the work. We don't know about Timothy's father at all. My father was a preacher. He was interested in my training and did a great job. When I was 16 years old, he even arranged for me to preach for a little congregation several miles away that needed a fill-in preacher one Sunday. And the night before I preached those two sermons, I was told I was going to rehearse those two sermons. And I was going to rehearse them again and rehearse them a third time.
I was going to preach 6 sermons on Saturday night. My dad didn't tell me that. My mom did. And she listened to me every minute of those six sermons. Mothers, you resonate with your influence through your children's lives. So remember, treasure these moments. Remember that what you're doing now may seem really trivial at times, but you're laying a foundation that will make a difference for a lot of people. Hannah, Mary, and Eunice. 3 great heroes of faith in the Bible. Women, mothers, whose impact continues today because they dedicated themselves to serving God, to building their own faith, and to dedicating their children to the service of God. It remains true for each of us, and I think Barbara Bush said it well, that your success as a family, and in an election year we need to remember these words. Your success as a family and our success as a society depends not on what happens in the White House, but what happens inside your house. Think about that one for a minute. If each of us works on our own house and building our house and our family, and that influence spreads throughout our society and infiltrates our society, it won't matter who's in the White House. So let's sing together a prayer. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes, homes where the Bible is loved and taught, homes where the Master's will is sought, homes crowned with thy love has wrought. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes, homes where the Father is true and strong, homes that are free from the blight of wrong, homes that are with love and song. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes. Homes where the mother in queenly quest strives to show others thy way is best. 'Tis an honored guest. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes. Homes where the children are led to know Christ in His pity who loves them so. Homes where the scorn and cold. God, give us Christian homes. God, give us Christian homes. Amen. So this morning we looked at Hannah, who dedicated her son to the Lord's service. At Mary, who persevered in her own suffering because of her love for God and her love for her son. And Eunice, who taught her child the Scriptures and the faith as she had been taught by her own mother Lois.
And from these women, we see an example that families today can follow. None of them, well, especially Hannah and Mary, were not the ordinary, stereotypical situations. There was some difficulty there, some opposition from society, some strain. But they overcame and they persevered because of their love for God and their love for their children. But to dedicate yourself to bringing your child up as you should, you have to dedicate yourself first to serving the Lord. So this morning it may be you have not yet yourself confessed Jesus as Lord, and you have not been baptized into Him to become a child of God and be forgiven of your sins. It may be that as a mother today, or as a parent, or as a father, you just really need some prayer. It may be as a child that you need prayer that you're going to be a better child for that mother. And that you will encourage her more as the days pass by. If you need to respond in any way today, right now, come while we stand and we sing.